guys, Jasmine here coming at you with another Finders Weepers, Losers Keepers. Biggest losers of the Bible. So we just celebrated Martin Luther King Day. We just welcomed in a new administration to the United States government. There's a lot of questions about who's good, who's bad, how they get there. Is this the rise of a nation? Is this the fall of a nation? And is God's hand still in it? Job 12, verse 23 says, "The Lord makes nations great, then destroys them. He enlarges nations, then leads them away." When you look at Martin Luther King, he was a man of faith. He worked very hard to fight for justice, but yet he was assassinated. Some would easily say that's not fair. We often find that justice isn't provided in this life in the way that we think that it should be. Today, we are going to tackle the book of Job. We see that Job actually reflected on just this very thought. Unlike Abraham, who had some character flaws, or Noah, who had a major lapse in judgment, we see that Job consistently maintained his status as righteous and blameless according to God's view of him. And we don't see any major issues with his behavior or anything that he does that seems to be out of character. So I guess the overall question, and probably one of the biggest questions in the study of basically any religion, is how is that justice? Job chapter 1, verse 20 through 23, it reads, "Then Job stood up, tore his robe, shaved his head. He fell to the ground and worshipped, saying, 'Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will leave this life. The Lord gives, and the Lord takes away. Praise the name of Yahweh.'" Throughout all of this, Job did not sin or blame God for anything. Job does change his tune temporarily, but he still maintains that he is blameless, as does God. So what's going on here? Let's take a look.
It is the single most important problem in religious philosophy. Now, religious philosophy deals with a lot of issues. How do you know there's God? How do you know there's Torah? But let's say a person believes in God, a person believes in Torah. I have no problem with that. But the big problem that people do have is, okay, I believe in God, but God is supposed to be just and God is supposed to be kind. Why do bad things happen to good people? Why do good things happen to bad people?
Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Job. The first, Proverbs, showed us that God is wise and just.
Yeah, we learned that God has ordered the world so that it's fair. The righteous are rewarded, the wicked are punished. In other words, you get what you deserve.
But then we meet Ecclesiastes, who observes, people don't always get what they deserve.
Yeah, he said the world isn't always fair, that life is unpredictable and hard to comprehend, just like smoke.
And this makes you wonder, okay, well, is God wise and just?
Exactly. And so it's that question that is being explored in the final book of wisdom, Job.
All right, let's dive in.
Job is described as a man. By the way, he is not identified as Jewish. And the reason is because what Job is describing is not a particular problem of the Jewish people. It is a human problem. And Job, in some ways, is every man, capital E. And that is why he is not described as Jewish. He is not described as keeping the mitzvot. He is described as God-fearing. This righteous man called Job, who is perfect in his faith. He fears the Almighty. He gives charity. He tries to do everything that he can do. And he's living a good life. He's wealthy. He has a large family. He's well-respected. He's admired. He's a paragon of virtue and a foundation of his community. Now, we then switch the scene. Imagine this dramatically. We then switch the scene to heaven. And Job is not aware of this. We're aware of it. And God is holding a heavenly court surrounded by angels, as if God is the chief justice, and there's this heavenly council of angels. And God says to the angels, "Have you ever seen such a righteous person as as Job? Isn't he the greatest you've ever seen?" So there is one dissenting voice, and that dissenting voice is called Satan. This is very interesting. In the Christian tradition, Satan is a fallen angel, meaning he's an angel that got kicked out of heaven because he rebelled against God, and he became almost God's rival, whether it's the Antichrist or whatever it would be. In the Jewish tradition, first of all, I want to point out two things about Satan. Satan first appears in the book of Job. Satan is Satan. Number one, Satan is actually not a name, it is a function. He is called Ha-Satan, the Satan. And what is his function? It simply means the prosecutor. He is not a fallen angel. He's up there in the heavenly court. And he is literally what we would call the devil's advocate. When God says, oh, this person deserves goodness and blessing. So the Satan is the district attorney that is supposed to point out the negatives. God and the Satan are engaged in a gambling bet, a wager. I bet you, God, if you start taking away stuff, Job is going to rebel against you. And God says, I accept the bet.
It allows the Satan to inflict suffering on Job.
But be it as it may, Job is totally clueless here. He doesn't know what's going on. And all of a sudden, all sorts of things begin to happen.
So Satan departed from the presence of the Lord and set out to destroy Job. Now it so happened that on a given day, Job's servants were working in the fields when an army attacked.
Sabaeans! It's the Sabaeans! Go! Go!
The Sabaeans were ruthless, killing Job's servants and making off with the herds. Only one servant survived and ran to the house of his master.
Master Job! Master Job! The Sabaeans! They have taken the herds and killed all the servants, and I alone have survived.
At nearly the same time, a hailstone of fire fell to earth, consuming Job's herd of sheep and the servants who tended them.
The heavens are raining fire! Run for your lives! Oh, Master! Master Job, there was nothing we could do. Fire fell from the heavens, killing all your sheep and your servants who were tending them. And I alone have escaped to share this terrible news.
And yet a third tragedy struck Job in that very hour.
What's that? It's coming from all around.
The Chaldean army surrounded Job's servants, killing them and making away with his camels. Once again, all the servants were killed, save for one.
The camels, they're all gone. Stolen by the Chaldeans, who killed your servants. All except me, who escaped to tell you what has happened.
No. This can't be.
With all his livestock dead or stolen, and his servants killed, Job was about to receive the worst news yet.
Brother,
What is it?
I do not know. It looks like it's coming this... Inside! Back inside! Now! Get back inside!
God, help us! Master, oh Master, I cannot bear to tell you the news.
What is it? Look at me now and tell me what has happened.
A great wind came upon the home of your eldest while he was feasting with his brothers and sisters. It destroyed the house and all your children. All of them have been killed. I alone have escaped to tell you.
No!
Hearing the tragic news, Job tore his robe and ran into his house. With his knife, he shaved all of his hair, and falling to the ground, he worshipped God.
Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall depart this earth. The Lord God has given to me, and now he has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord.
In all the loss Job endured, he did not sin by blaming God.
He is blameless and upright. He fears God and turns away from all evil. He maintains his integrity, even though you incited me against him, to harm him without cause.
Skin for skin. A man will give up everything he has to save his own life. Stretch out your hand now, and strike his flesh, and he will curse you to your face.
He is in your hands. Only spare his life.
Once again, Satan left the presence of the Lord and made his way to Job.
Get them off!
What is it? What's wrong?
Boils, inflamed sores covered Job's body from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. Great with discomfort, he attempted to scrape them off, but his agony only grew worse. While Job's wife was horrified to see Job's condition, she was equally perplexed as to why all these things were coming upon him.
I don't understand. How is it you can keep your integrity before God? Curse him now, so you may die.
You speak as a fool. How can we accept good from God and not accept trouble?
In all his affliction, God's servant Job did not sin. Now Job had 3 friends who, upon hearing what had come upon him, sought Job out to comfort him. Their names were Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. As they approached their friend, they covered themselves in dust and tore their garments.
Job? Can this be you?
What is this evil that has fallen on you?
Sharing his grief, Job's friends sat with him in silence. They could see the great suffering their friend was enduring. Seven days and nights passed, and still they sat in silence until...
Let the day I was born disappear. May it be lost. May people curse that day. Oh, why? Why did I not just die the same day I was born? For what I feared the most has come upon me.
We're going to find out that they will repeatedly misdiagnose Job. You know what I mean by misdiagnosing. I heard a story about a woman dealing with some pretty severe back pain. So she went to a chiropractor, and the chiropractor looked her over and said, "Oh, I see the problem. You have these vertebrae that are, out of whack." And he prescribed a treatment regimen that she would go through over the next several weeks, and that within a month the woman was dead. And she had died not from the issue that that particular doctor found, but there was in fact a more serious issue that eventually took her life and was in fact causing her pain. Now, the chiropractor wasn't necessarily wrong, that the real situation was beyond his ability to diagnose. And we're going to find that that is what Job's friends do to him. You take some of the things that they say to him, you take those verses out of context, and you look at them for just what they are, and you think, that's true. The problem is that they continually misdiagnose Job, and they speak of things for which they have no understanding. It's beyond their pay grade. It's beyond their ability. Why must the godly wait for him in vain? And that is the question that is haunting Job, and that is the essence of what he says in that chapter. Skip down now to chapter 25. Verse 5. Behold, even the moon is not bright, and the stars are not pure in his eyes. How much less a man like you, Job, who is a maggot, and the son of a man who is a worm. Wow, aren't these guys just delightful? With friends like this, who needs the enemy? Chapter 26. Then Job answered and said, how you have counseled him who has no wisdom, and plentifully declared sound knowledge. And whose help have you uttered words, and whose breath has come from you? Now that's a great question. Job is challenging them and saying, just exactly whose word have you given me? God's word? So who are you speaking for here? By what spirit are you, speaking? What is the point, Job, that you're saying all this? Hang on, I'll give you the point in just a second. Verse 11. The pillars of heaven tremble and are astounded at his rebuke. By his power he stilled the sea. By his understanding he shattered Rahab. By his wind the heavens were made fair. His hand pierced the fleeing serpent. Behold, these are but the outskirts of his ways. And how small a whisper do we hear of him? But the thunder of his power, here's the question, who can understand? And that's the point of Job's remarks to his friend. He earlier asked them the question, by whose spirit do you speak? And whose words are you uttering? Now he begins to speak of God's immensity and greatness and power. And he says, do you really believe you understand all the ways of God? That's what he's saying to his friends. This is that echoing of Isaiah chapter 55, where God says, my ways are not your ways, and my thoughts are not your thoughts. People want to believe that that is not true. They will judge God's actions by themselves, and they'll point to something that they say God did. They'll say, I'd never do that. And you know what they're saying to you? They're saying, my ways are equal to his ways. And then they're saying, and then he did this, and I don't get it, so that makes it dumb. And what they're saying by that is, my thoughts are equal to his thoughts, right? And God all the while says, my ways are so far above your ways. My thoughts are so far above your thoughts. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways. Stop here for just a moment.
So by the end of the dialogue, Job demands that God come and explain himself in person, and God does so. He comes in the form of a great storm cloud.
Now, God doesn't give Job a direct answer. He doesn't tell Job about the conversation with the Satan.
Yeah, he does something very different. He takes Job on a virtual tour of the universe. He shows Job how grand the world is, and he asks him if he's even capable of running it or understanding it, just for a day. He shows Job how much detail there is in the world, things that we might see every day but really don't understand at all. But God does. He knows it all intimately. He pays attention to the beauty and operations of the universe in ways that we haven't even imagined and in places that we will never see.
Then to conclude, God shows Job two wondrous beasts and brags about how great they are.
Yeah, they are dangerous. I mean, they would kill you without even thinking about it. And God says they're not evil. They're actually a part of his good world.
And then that's it. That's God's whole defense. It's kind of weird. I mean, what was this all about?
It seems to be this. From Job's point of view, it looks like God is not just. But God's perspective is infinitely bigger. He's dynamically interacting with a whole universe of complexity when he makes decisions. And this is what God calls his wisdom.
So Job asking God to defend himself is actually kind of absurd.
He couldn't comprehend this kind of complexity even if he wanted to.
So where does this leave us?
Well, it leaves Job in a place of humility. He never learned why he suffered, and yet he's able to live in peace and in the fear of the Lord.
All this time, Job has been saying over and over, I want to talk to God. I want to discuss what I've been through with the Almighty, because I lost everything I owned, and I've lost my children, and I have lost my health. And I want to discuss this with God. And no doubt, Job wanted to ask the question that many of us have wanted to ask God on many occasions, and that is the simple question, why? But you see, there's something interesting about that question, the question why. It assumes that you and God are equally matched, because we assume we're going to be able to understand the answer. And so God begins to take Job through a series of questions to simply bring him to the conclusion, Job, you don't know. You don't know. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? That's the question you asked. Therefore I have uttered what I do not know. Things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. Do you see what Job has been brought to? He's been brought to a place of saying, you're right. I don't understand anything about you or what you do. And I don't get it. And what he's saying here is something very similar to what David said. Let me show you a passage from Psalm 139 where David wrote, such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain it.
But that's not where the book ends, because after this, God restores to Job double everything he had lost. And this, again, is surprising. I mean, is this a reward? Is God saying, congratulations, Job, you passed this elaborate test?
No, I mean, the whole book just made the point that Job losing everything was not a punishment, and so now getting it back isn't a reward.
So why does he get it back?
Well, apparently, God, in his wisdom, decided to give Job a gift. We don't know why. But what we do know is that Job is now the kind of person who, no matter what comes, good or bad, he can trust God's wisdom.
In verse 15 it says, and in the land there was no women so beautiful as Job's daughters, and their father gave them an inheritance among their brothers. And after this Job lived 140 years. Wow! And saw his sons and his sons' sons 4 generations. And Job died an old man and full of days. And we're kind of like, oh, phew, thank you, God. You know, I think maybe Job might have been right about you after all if you hadn't given him back his stuff. Listen, the restoration of his material wealth was not the blessing, was not the richness that Job received from this experience. I found an incredible quote that says it better than I can say it, and here's how it goes. Misfortune does not mean God has forsaken his own, or I'll even make that personal. It doesn't mean God has forsaken you, his children. It does mean he has plans that the sufferer may know nothing of. A believer's unmerited tragedy may never be fully understood, yet he can realize that God is in charge, that God still loves him and cares for him. And that is the important lesson that Job learned. It wasn't getting all the stuff back. It was knowing that no matter what, God has a plan. God has a purpose. And I can trust him with my life. I can give him my life. And there will be things he will give, and there will be things he will take away. But God is still God who loves me, will never leave me, nor forsake me. And God has a plan, and one day, Christians, one day, we will stand before him in glory. And not one single person will say, that wasn't a good plan. In fact, I believe we will say just the opposite. We will thank him for the wonders of his love, which we couldn't even begin at the time to understand.
And that's the book of Job.
The book of Job ultimately is not about answers. The book of Job is ultimately about trusting that there are reasons, trusting there are purposes, and trusting that your relationship to God can exist even when times are difficult. This was not an issue that only bothers modern man. In fact, Moses himself questioned the Almighty. If you remember in the book of Exodus, in one of the verses, Moses says to God, "Show me your ways." And the interpretation is he wanted to understand, why do righteous people suffer? And why do evildoers prosper? And the interesting thing is, he asks God that question, and God doesn't answer it. God simply says, I will be gracious to whom I choose to be gracious. I will be merciful to whom I choose to be merciful. In other words, you're asking me a question, I'm not going to answer it. This is the way it is.
It's an honor to be here. To see my biggest idol and be right here with you, it's a blessing to me. And I thank God for it. I really do.
See, you know, man, what's crazy about this is if you're a spiritual person, you ain't missing this. You just got to see how it all come together. You have no idea who God made you to be. But you got to hang in there to find out. You can't give up. It's at your darkest moments he show up. He show up, he be shining, man.
Every stage of destruction can ultimately lead to a higher divine purpose. Why in 1948 was there almost a unanimous vote that there ought to be a Jewish state? Of course, it was God's doing, but historically, it was very much connected to the Holocaust. There was a brief window in time in which the world either felt guilty or they felt compassion for a nation that suffered so much. What happens to you is necessary for the overall plan that God has for the universe. Job has a question, meaning, if I'm righteous, why is this happening? The friends are offering an answer. You must not be righteous. Job rejects that. And God says Job is right. So some have suggested God is actually not answering the question at all. God is telling Job, I'm not going to answer the question. I just want you to know that I'm here. I want you to know that I'm with you. I want you to know that as you walk through the dark tunnel of life, there'll be so many things you're not going to understand, and so many things that don't make sense. But I'm not here to intellectually give you an explanation. I'm here so you will feel the reality of my presence, and that in your suffering you're not alone. And I will be here to give you strength. I will be here to give you hope. I will be here to give you resilience. And that's going to be enough. If I could quote hardly a religious source, Mick Jagger, you can't always get what you want, but you get what you need.
Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and not only to this channel, but also HPZN Music is this place where you're going to find new Christian musical content. There are going to be some hot new playlists coming out, so make sure you are keeping your eyes peeled for that, as well as Adonai Tech. You'll have the Tech Talks from week to week, which will tell you about all the new developments that you might have missed. All right, losers, that's all I got for today, and I can't wait to see where it takes us next time. Bye, guys.